Hello everyone, welcome to 90-Day News Hub. Watch the full video for the latest shocking updates. What you are about to hear is not the story you think you know. For years, we've all followed the saga of Jenny Slatten and Sumit Singh on 90-Day Fiancé. We've been sold a narrative, a carefully crafted tale of star-crossed lovers battling a 31-year age gap, insurmountable cultural divides, and a family seemingly ripped from a dramatic playbook. It's the story of a woman who gave up everything for love, and a man who defied his family for his heart. But what if that's a lie? What if the entire story from the very first message sent by a fake profile named Michael Joes was never about love at all? What if it was about something far more calculated? A long con so intricate and manipulative that the two people at its center were merely pawns in a much larger game. We've dug deeper than anyone, connected with sources on the ground, and pieced together a timeline that exposes the official narrative for what it is, smokescreen. Before we pull back the curtain on one of the most sophisticated deceptions in reality television history, do me a favor. If you're tired of the manufactured drama and want the stories that exist in the shadows, hit that subscribe button and ring the bell. This is the Tell-All Tapes. And we don't just recap the show, we uncover the real script. Give this video a like to help us fight the algorithm because the theory we're about to lay out will change everything you thought you knew about Jenny and Sumit. Let's begin where the official story begins. In 2011, the narrative we're given is that of a lonely 23-year-old Sumit Singh trapped in a loveless arranged marriage working a dead-end job in a Delhi call center. His escape creating a fake Facebook profile under the name Michael Jones, a handsome English man. This is presented as whimsical, almost innocent act of escapism. But our insider reports suggest this was no random act. This was step one of a meticulously planned operation. The profile of Michael Jones wasn't an escape. It was bait. And it was designed with a very specific target in mind. Our sources suggest that Sumit was not acting alone. The pressure from his family, particularly his father, Anil, about his lack of ambition and prospects was immense. But it wasn't pressure to conform. It was pressure to produce. The creation of Michael Jones, we theorize, was a family-sanctioned project. They needed a way out of their financial mediocrity. And they saw an opportunity in the vast, untapped world of lonely Western women with disposable income. They weren't looking for a quick score. They were looking for the perfect mark. Someone old enough to be financially established, but perhaps emotionally vulnerable. Someone divorced, maybe a little lonely, dreaming of an adventure. Someone who would be so invested in the fantasy that they would overlook glaring red flags. They found Jenny Slatten, a 58-year-old from Palm Springs, living on a modest pension. She ticked every single box. For months, Michael Jones groomed her, building a fantasy of a life together, a romantic escape. He was everything her life in Palm Springs wasn't. The lie was the hook, and Jenny swallowed it whole. Now, let's fast forward to 2013. Jenny, completely enchanted, liquidates what she can and flies to India to meet her English prince. The official story frames the revol at the New Delhi Starbucks as a moment of panic for Sumit. A tearful confession where he comes clean and begs for forgiveness. We are told that Jenny, in a testament to her boundless love, forgave him almost instantly. This is the cornerstone of their entire love story. But our exclusive theory reframes this event not as a confession but as a calculated test, a litmus test. The masterminds behind this operation, who we believe to be his parents, Sana and Anil, knew the Michael Jones lie was unsustainable in person. The real test was not whether Jenny would believe the lie, but whether she would forgive it. Her forgiveness would signal that her emotional investment had reached a point of no return. It would prove she was so desperate for the fantasy to be real that she would accept any version of it, even a deeply flawed and deceptive one. When Jenny forgave Sumit, she didn't just forgive a lie, she passed their test. She proved she was the perfect long-term investment. And then comes the next layer of this deception, a detail often presented as a romantic footnote, but which our sources say was a crucial turning point. Jenny later revealed that Sumit lost his virginity to her on that first trip. In the context of a love story, it's moment of profound intimacy, but in the context of a long con, it's the anchor. was the move that escalated the relationship from an emotional connection to a physical one, creating a bond that would be infinitely harder for Jenny to break. It wasn't just about love. It was about ensuring she was inextricably tied to him, making it almost impossible for her to walk away, no matter what other deceptions might later be revealed. While his family maintained the public pretense of her being a platonic Facebook friend behind closed doors, they knew their son had just secured their asset. The next phase of the plan required a complication, a barrier to keep the narrative moving and to keep Jenny on the hook without giving her full control. Enter Sumit's secret arranged marriage. The show presents this as Sumit's personal prison, a situation he was forced into and was hiding from Jenny. But what if marriage wasn't a problem? What if it was a tool? Our theory posits that the family fully supported the arranged marriage because it served as the perfect culturally acceptable excuse to stall Jenny. Allowed Suma to keep her dangling for years. He could claim he loved her, that he wanted to be with her, but was trapped by family duty and tradition. Was the ultimate source of drama and sympathy. It allowed him to control the pace of the entire relationship. And, most importantly, it was the perfect storyline, a built-in conflict that would be irresistible to a reality production. And that we believe was the goal all along. The ultimate prize wasn't Jenny's pension. It was a television contract. Our investigation suggests that around the time Jenny was preparing to move to India for the second time, Anil Singh was the one who began researching American reality television shows. He saw the potential. He understood that their story, the massive age gap, the catfishing, the secret wife, the clashing cultures, wasn't a series of unfortunate problems. It's a gold mine of content. They had the perfect cast of characters. The naive American, the conflicted Indian son, and the formidable traditional parents. They weren't just living a dramatic life. Disclaimer before we begin. This video discusses allegations, fan theories, and interpreted timelines from public information. Nothing here is presented as proven fact unless explicitly stated as confirmed on screen by TLC or direct public statements. Our goal is commentary and analysis, not harassment or defamation. What you're about to hear is not the story you think you know. For years, the world has watched Jenny Slatten and Sumit Singh on 90 Day Fiancé like it was the ultimate love against all odds fairy tale. An older American woman leaving everything behind, a younger Indian man risking everything, a hostile family standing in the way, and two star-crossed lovers fighting for their happily ever after. That's the narrative we were sold. A clean storyline, dramatic enough to binge, emotional enough to debate, and open-ended enough to keep viewers coming back. But tonight, we're not retelling the storyline. We're examining the possibility that the storyline itself was the smokescreen. Because when you strip away the music cues, the confessionals, and the edits, one question refuses to die. What if the entire relationship arc was never primarily about love? What if it was about control, leverage, and a long game that started years before cameras ever rolled? And what if the people we assumed were supporting characters, the family, the cultural pressure, the arranged marriage, were actually the main drivers of the strategy? Welcome to Tell All Tapes, where we don't just recap the show, we dissect the script behind the script. If you're tired of manufactured drama and you want the stories that exist in the shadows, hit subscribe and ring the bell. Because the theory we're laying out tonight may change how you see Jenny and Sumit forever. Let's begin where the official story begins, the fake profile. The Michael Jones era. The public version is that a young Sumit, bored and stuck, created a fake Facebook profile under the name Michael Jones and messaged women for fun. It's framed as reckless, childish, maybe even romantic in that twisted reality TV way, like a goofy mistake that accidentally turned into real love. But the moment you stop treating it like a rom-com and start treating it like a pattern, the timeline becomes disturbing. Catfishing isn't just lying. It's a structure. It's a process. It's bait, hook, pressure, and payoff. And that's why we're asking, was this truly a lonely young man making impulsive decisions? Or was it step one of something far more deliberate? Here's the first red flag: target selection. Catfishers don't always choose randomly. The most successful long cons are built around identifying the right type of person. Someone emotionally available. Someone who believes in a second chance. Someone who wants to feel chosen. And often, someone who has some form of stability the con artist lacks. In Jenny's case, she was older, divorced, and living a quiet life. Not a millionaire, but steady, pension, savings, a predictable routine, and a longing for something bigger than the everyday. If you were building a long con, you wouldn't necessarily hunt for a celebrity-level fortune. You'd hunt for someone who can be moved. Someone who can be persuaded to relocate. Someone who can be convinced to cut off their support system. Someone who will invest emotionally first and financially later. And that's where the theory begins. What if Michael Jones wasn't an accident? What if it was an audition, a test run, a fishing expedition that became a chosen mission the moment Jenny responded the right way? Now, let's talk about the second red flag, longevity. This wasn't a one-week flirtation. This wasn't a short-lived internet fling. The relationship stretches across years, evolving from messages to calls to emotional dependency. And in long cons, time is not a barrier, it's a tool. The longer you keep someone engaged, the more they rationalize, the more they sacrifice, the more they defend you, even when the evidence screams that they shouldn't. Time creates sunk cost, and sunk cost creates loyalty. So when we hear that the catfish lasted years, it doesn't make the story more romantic. It makes it more strategic. Then comes the third red flag, the reveal. The official story tells us Jenny flew to India and met Sumit in person, and at some point, the truth about Michael Jones fell apart. We're shown this as a moment of guilt, a breakdown, an apology. Jenny is portrayed as shocked but forgiving, because love, because destiny, because the heart wants what it wants. But in a long con, the reveal can serve a completely different function. It's not always a confession. It can be a calibration, a test to see how far the victim has been conditioned. Because if someone forgives the biggest lie early on, they're more likely to forgive the next lies later. That's not romance. That's leverage. Under this theory, the Michael Jones reveal wasn't the end of the con. It was the quality check. It was the moment they measured Jenny's emotional threshold. If she walked away, she was never useful. If she stayed, she was the perfect long-term investment. And according to the narrative we've all watched, she stayed. She forgave. She committed even harder. Which brings us to the next layer, isolation. One of the oldest manipulation strategies in any controlling relationship is separating a person from their normal life. It doesn't have to be dramatic. It can be slow. It can be framed as love. It can sound like, come visit me, then stay longer, then why don't you move here? Then suddenly, the victim's world shrinks. Friends become far away. Family becomes unsupportive. The new environment becomes the only environment. The relationship becomes the entire universe. Jenny didn't just date someone from another country. She relocated. She placed herself into a culture where she would naturally have less power. Language barriers, social norms, legal systems, family structures, immigration complexity. And the show frames that as devotion. But a strategist would call it positioning. If the goal was control, moving Jenny to India wasn't a hurdle. It was the advantage. Now, let's talk about the family. Because this theory collapses if the family is truly just angry parents. But if you watch closely, the family dynamic is the engine of the entire storyline. They object. They insult. They threaten. They pressure. They push Sumit toward an arranged marriage. They guilt him. They pull him back. They set conditions. They punish him emotionally. Every major turning point involves them. That's not incidental. That's structural. The question becomes, are they simply reacting, or are they steering? Here's what we know as confirmed on the show. Sumit did hide a marriage. Jenny was blindsided. The marriage existed while Sumit maintained the relationship with Jenny. That fact alone proves the reality was more complicated than honest lovers. It proves deception was central. And deception is not random. It is maintained because it serves a purpose. Under the theory, the arranged marriage wasn't just cultural tradition, it was a tactical cage. It kept Sumit anchored in family control while the relationship with Jenny remained a separate channel of leverage. Think about it. If Sumit marries someone chosen by the family gains legitimacy and social cover. Meanwhile, Jenny remains emotionally bound and increasingly invested. Two parallel tracks. Two sources of pressure. Two sources of control. And the longer it continues, the more trapped everyone becomes, especially Jenny, who has already sacrificed everything and now has to justify it to herself. And then there's the most uncomfortable piece. Intimacy as an anchor. In your draft, you mention the claim that Jenny was Sumit's first sexual experience. Whether or not that detail is fully accurate or dramatized, the concept is important. Escalating intimacy can create emotional bondage. If Jenny believed she was his first, she would feel uniquely chosen, uniquely responsible, uniquely connected. That feeling can override logic. It can keep someone in a relationship even after betrayal. It can make them defend the person who hurt them. Because now the story isn't just, we're dating. It becomes, we're bonded. And that's how long cons survive, by turning red flags into proof of destiny. Now let's shift into the timeline reconstruction. The way a real investigator would, not the way a producer would. Step 1. Contact and grooming. The fake profile appears. The communication begins. The victim feels seen. Compliments arrive. Attention becomes routine. Routine becomes dependence. Step 2. Escalation. The relationship deepens. Emotional confessions happen. Future promises are introduced. The victim begins imagining a new life. Step 3. First in-person contact. Reality threatens the fantasy. The con must either collapse or evolve. This is where the reveal becomes the test. If the victim walks, the con dies. If the victim forgives, the con upgrades. Step 4. Relocation and sacrifice. The victim starts rearranging their life, work, family, finances, identity. The con artist's world becomes the victim's entire reality. Step 5. Complications introduced. Enter the family drama, the cultural barriers, the legal obstacles. These complications do two things. They keep the victim emotionally engaged, we're fighting for love, and they give the con structure, delays, demands, conditions. We need more time. We need more money. We need to prove something. Step 6. Continuous control cycles. Hope, setback, apology, promise, setback again. Each cycle strengthens the sunk cost. The victim stays because leaving would mean admitting the sacrifice was for nothing. That's the skeleton of the theory. Now, if we apply that skeleton to Jenny and Sumit, what do we see? We see a story that, year after year, constantly resets the finish line. First it was Michael Jones. Then it was family approval. Then it was the marriage secret. Then it was divorce delays. Then it was parents' conditions. Then it was cohabitation conflicts. Then it was financial survival. Then it was work and stability. Always something. Always another mountain. Always another reason Jenny has to endure. That is the hallmark of a relationship narrative that can be milked, emotionally, financially, and for television. Which brings us to the explosive possibility. What if the love story wasn't just a relationship, but a product? Reality TV monetizes conflict. Social media monetizes attention. Cameos monetize fandom. Interviews monetize shock. And the more messy the story gets, the more it pays. So here's the question that makes this theory so dangerous. Who benefited the most from the chaos? Jenny got heartbreak, culture shock, isolation, and constant humiliation. Sumit got fame, a storyline, and a long-running relevance. The family got control, screen time, and potentially leverage over Sumit's choices and resources. And the network got years of content. Under this lens, Jenny starts to look less like the hero of a love story and more like the centerpiece of an economy. A human investment. A narrative asset. A person whose willingness to forgive became the currency that kept the machine running. Now, I want to be very careful here. We are not claiming this is proven. We are exploring a theory based on patterns, timelines, and what has been publicly shown. But if you're watching and thinking, this sounds too dark, I need you to remember something. The darkest cons don't start dark. They start sweet. They start with compliments. They start with destiny. They start with, I've never felt this way before. That's how the trap closes. And the trap closes so gently that by the time you realize you're trapped, you've already given up everything. And we're going to break down the most suspicious turning points one by one. The reveal at the cafe, the timing of the arranged marriage, the way the family applied pressure, the moments when the narrative conveniently shifted to keep Jenny locked in place, and the financial reality behind the scenes. What was happening to Jenny's stability as the years dragged on? We'll also examine the psychological tactics, guilt loops, dependency creation, and the hope sandwich strategy that keeps a person staying through endless betrayal. But before we go there, I want you to pause and ask yourself one question. If this was truly a simple love story, why did it require so many layers of deception to exist at all? Because love doesn't need a fake identity. Love doesn't need a secret marriage. Love doesn't need years of delay and chaos just to survive. Unless the chaos is the point. Unless the chaos is the system. Unless the chaos is the business model. And if that's true, then the Michael Jones message wasn't a mistake. It was the opening move. And Jenny didn't just fall in love. She walked into a maze designed to make her lose herself. This is tell-all tapes. And in the next part, we're pulling the receipt-style timeline apart, step by step, so you can decide whether you believe this was destiny or design. Is where we start putting flesh on the bones. We're going to walk through the most suspicious turning points in the Jenny and Sumit timeline, not as fans, but as investigators. Because when you line up the events in chronological order, a pattern emerges that feels less like chaos and more like choreography. Let's go back to that first trip in 2013, the Starbucks meeting in New Delhi. The official version is emotional and cinematic. Sumit panics, admits he's not Michael Jones. Jenny is devastated, then she forgives him because she already loves him. Cue dramatic music. Cue destiny. But think about the logistics. If Sumit had been lying for months as Michael Jones, he knew the truth would collapse the moment Jenny saw him. That means the trip was never going to sustain the fake identity. So why let her come at all? In a random, reckless lie, you'd ghost the person. You'd end it before real-world consequences. But he didn't. He invited her into reality. That's not panic behavior. That's escalation. Under the theory, this trip was the transition from grooming to anchoring. The reveal wasn't an accident. It was a stress test. Would she walk away, or would she double down? And when she forgave him, the relationship crossed from fantasy into a high-control bond. Next turning point. The arranged marriage. We're told Sumit was forced into an arranged marriage by his parents while still emotionally connected to Jenny. This is portrayed as cultural tragedy, a young man trapped by tradition. But from a strategy perspective, it does something else. It creates a permanent power structure. With a wife chosen by the family maintains control over Sumit's social standing, finances, and legal obligations. Jenny becomes the emotional outlier, the external pressure point. She can't fully integrate, but she can't fully leave. She exists in limbo. That limbo is where control thrives. Because every time Jenny demands clarity, the family can say, culture, and every time Sumit demands freedom, the family can say, Jenny is the problem. It creates a triangle where Jenny is always the outsider and always fighting to justify her place. Then comes the reveal of the marriage to Jenny. On the show, this is framed as betrayal, heartbreak, and drama. But look at the timing. Jenny had already invested years. She had already traveled. She had already emotionally bonded. The reveal comes after sunk cost is maximum. If you were designing a psychological trap, this is exactly when you drop the bomb. Because leaving now would mean admitting everything was built on lies. Staying means doubling down. Most humans choose doubling down. That's the sunk cost trap. Now, let's examine the family's on-screen behavior. They don't just disapprove. They negotiate. They set conditions. They demand respect. They test boundaries. They threaten disownment. They use emotional pressure, guilt, and cultural shame. From a TV perspective, it's drama gold. From a control perspective, it's leverage. Every time Jenny and Sumit try to move forward, the family introduces a new hurdle. It keeps Jenny emotionally activated, constantly proving herself, constantly trying to earn acceptance that may never come. That's a classic control loop. Hope, rejection, hope, rejection. It's psychologically exhausting, and exhaustion creates compliance. Next turning point. Jenny's relocation. Moving to India wasn't just a romantic gesture. It was a structural shift. In the United States, Jenny had familiarity, legal systems she understood, social support, and cultural power. In India, she had none of that. She was dependent on Sumit for language, navigation, social norms, and even basic logistics. Dependency is not inherently evil, but it is a power imbalance. And in long cons, power imbalance is currency. If Jenny wanted to leave, it would be complicated. If she wanted to stay, it required constant negotiation. The environment itself became a cage disguised as adventure. Now let's talk money, because every long con eventually touches resources. We know from public interviews and the show that Jenny did not have massive wealth. She had savings, a pension, and limited financial security. Yet she relocated, traveled, and committed to a life that required ongoing expenses. Meanwhile, Sumit gained reality TV income, cameo opportunities, sponsorships, and social media influence. The more chaotic the story, the more screen time. The more screen time, the more money. That doesn't prove exploitation, but it does show asymmetry in benefit. Jenny risked stability. Sumit gained visibility. The family gained relevance. The network gained content. Now let's analyze the psychological pattern. One tactic used in high-control relationships is the hope sandwich. You sandwich bad news between hope. For example, my parents hate you, but I love you. We can't marry now, but someday we will. This is hard, but our love is special. This keeps the victim focused on the future reward rather than the present harm. Jenny's entire timeline is structured around delayed reward. Marriage delayed. Acceptance delayed. Stability delayed. Happiness always just one obstacle away. And obstacles kept appearing. That's not accidental in narrative-driven television. It's a business model. Now, consider the virginity claim again, not as gossip, but as psychology. If Jenny believed she was Sumit's first, she would feel uniquely bonded and responsible. That's a powerful hook. It turns the relationship into a sacred origin story. Sacred stories are hard to abandon. Even if the origin story is built on deception, the emotional weight remains real. That's how people stay in relationships that outsiders see as toxic. Now let's reconstruct the timeline as a control narrative rather than a love story. Phase 1. Online grooming with Michael Jones. Phase 2. Emotional dependency through daily communication. Phase 3, in-person meeting and reveal test. Phase 4, physical intimacy to anchor bond. Phase 5, arranged marriage revelation to test loyalty. Phase 6, relocation to increase dependency. Phase 7, family conflict cycles to maintain emotional engagement. Phase 8, delayed marriage and conditional acceptance to keep Jenny invested. Phase 9, reality TV monetization to reward chaos. Phase 10, public narrative of love conquers all to justify everything. When you map it like this, it doesn't look random. It looks engineered. Now, does this mean Sumit and his family sat in a room plotting a decade-long con? We cannot prove that. It may be unconscious patterns, cultural pressure, and opportunism mixed with real feelings. But the structure remains suspicious. And in investigative storytelling, structure is evidence of design. Now let's address the elephant in the room. Why would Jenny stay? This is where victim psychology matters. Humans don't leave relationships based on logic. They leave based on identity. Jenny didn't just date Sumit. She became Jenny who moved to India for love. That identity became her story, her brand, her purpose. Leaving would mean losing the story. It would mean admitting the fairy tale was a mirage. For many people, that's more painful than staying in a flawed reality. Add global television, fan debates, and constant attention, and the psychological pressure multiplies. Jenny wasn't just living a relationship. She was living a global narrative. Now think about the parents again. On screen, they are villains. But villains in reality TV are valuable. Villains get screen time. Villains get edits. Villains get relevance. Whether they intended it or not, their opposition became the engine of the show. And if the opposition is the engine, then resolving the conflict would end the story. So the conflict must never fully resolve. That's why conditions keep changing. That's why acceptance is partial. That's why drama resets every season. It's narrative maintenance. And Jenny is always at the center of the storm. Now, here's the darkest part of the theory. Jenny as narrative asset. In modern reality TV, participants are not just people. They are characters. Characters generate arcs. Arcs generate episodes. Episodes generate revenue. Jenny's willingness to endure humiliation, cultural shock, and emotional pain generated years of content. Her tears became story beats. Her sacrifices became season finales. Her fights with the parents became cliffhangers. That doesn't mean she was consciously exploited by everyone. But it does mean her suffering was monetized by multiple systems. And if someone inside that system realized the value of keeping her emotionally locked in, the incentives align dangerously. Now let's connect this to the original long con theory. In classic long cons, the victim is slowly guided into a role that benefits the con artist over time. The victim believes they are pursuing love, but they are actually sustaining the con artist's lifestyle, narrative, or goals. If Sumit and his family benefited from Jenny's presence financially, socially, or narratively, then Jenny's emotional investment becomes the fuel for that system. Again, not proven, but structurally plausible. Now, think about every time Jenny tried to leave. Every time she expressed doubt. Every time she said, "I can't do this anymore." What happened next? Apologies. Promises. Emotional speeches. "I love you. I will fight for you. We will get married." That's the rescue phase of the control cycle. You pull the victim back in with hope. And once they're back in, the cycle restarts. That's how emotional entrapment works. Now, let's address the ultimate question. Are Jenny and Sumit genuinely in love? The answer can be both yes and still problematic. People in manipulative structures can still feel real affection. Love does not cancel power imbalance. Love does not erase deception. Love does not undo years of manipulation. In fact, love can be the glue that keeps the structure intact. That's what makes this theory so unsettling. It doesn't require villains twirling mustaches. It requires flawed humans, opportunistic systems, and incentives that reward chaos. Now, before we move to expose the possibility that Jenny and Sumit's love story may have followed the structure of a long con, mapped the timeline and psychological patterns. In Part 3, we're going to examine the engine behind everything: money, media, and the reality TV machine. Because love stories don't become decade-long global sagas by accident. They become sagas because they are profitable. And when something is profitable, it creates incentives that can trap everyone involved. Let's start with reality TV economics. Reality shows like 90 Day Fiancé are built on recurring conflict. Couples who resolve their issues quickly disappear. Couples who stay chaotic return season after season. Chaos equals contracts. Contracts equal paychecks. Paychecks equal dependency. Once you become a recurring character, your income becomes tied to your storyline. If the storyline ends, the income often ends with it. That creates a silent pressure to keep the story alive. Now look at Jenny and Sumit. Their story never fully resolves. Every season brings a new obstacle: parents, culture, marriage, divorce, visas, finances, cohabitation, family acceptance. The narrative never stabilizes. That's not just dramatic storytelling. That's serial content architecture. It keeps viewers engaged and keeps the couple relevant. The longer the conflict lasts, the longer the contracts last. Now let's talk about influencer economics. Reality TV is no longer just TV. It's social media, Cameo, YouTube interviews, sponsored posts, TikTok clips, tabloid articles, fan channels, and reaction videos. Every emotional breakdown becomes content. Every argument becomes a viral clip. Every reunion episode becomes trending drama. For Sumit, this means fame, followers, monetization opportunities, and a global identity. For Jenny, it means attention, relevance, and a public persona that may replace ordinary life. When your identity becomes content, walking away becomes complicated. Because walking away doesn't just end a relationship. It ends a brand. Now consider Jenny's financial position again. Publicly, she has said she lives on a pension and limited savings. She left the United States and relocated to India. That is a massive life decision. Once you make that move, reversing it requires resources, energy, and admitting that everything you sacrificed may have been for nothing. That's not just emotionally hard. It's existentially terrifying. So staying becomes the default. Now add the TV income. If reality TV and social media became a significant part of her financial support, then leaving the storyline could mean losing that income stream. That's not a conspiracy. That's how media ecosystems work. Participants become dependent on the system that depends on them. It's a loop. Now let's examine Sumit's incentives. Before Jenny, he worked in a call center. After Jenny and the show, he became a globally recognized reality TV personality. That shift changes everything. Fame brings opportunities. Opportunities bring power. Power changes relationship dynamics. Even if Sumit genuinely loved Jenny, the system rewarded him for staying in the relationship and staying in the conflict. That's a structural incentive. Now consider the parents again. On screen, they are framed as traditional, conservative, controlling. But they also became recurring characters. Recurring characters become known. Known characters become relevant. Relevance can bring opportunities, attention, and influence. Even if they never sought fame, the system turned them into part of the product. And once you're part of the product, you're part of the machine. Now let's talk about contracts. Reality TV contracts often limit what participants can say, what they can reveal, and when they can leave. They may include confidentiality clauses, non-disclosure agreements, and restrictions on public statements. That means the truth the audience sees is always filtered. It's edited. It's structured. It's sold. So when we ask, is this love real? We're asking a question inside a controlled narrative environment. The environment itself is designed to maximize drama, not truth. Now think about Jenny as a character. In classic storytelling, she is the archetype of the devoted older woman, sacrificing everything for love. Sumit is the conflicted younger man torn between tradition and passion. The parents are the antagonists. This is not random. This is a perfect global soap opera. Soap operas last decades because they never fully resolve. And soap operas make money because viewers emotionally invest. Jenny's pain became a storyline asset. Sumit's indecision became a cliffhanger engine. The parents' opposition became a villain arc. It's storytelling gold. Now let's talk about the psychological cost of being inside a story you can't easily exit. When millions of people watch your relationship, comment on it, judge it, meme it, and debate it, your private life becomes public property. Leaving is no longer just personal. It becomes a global headline. Staying becomes the path of least resistance. That's a psychological prison. Now consider the phrase sunk cost again, but on a public scale. Jenny didn't just invest money and time. She invested her public identity. She became Jenny from 90 Day Fiancé. That identity has value, but it also has inertia. Walking away from Sumit could mean walking away from the identity that gave her visibility, purpose, and recognition. That's not easy. Now let's examine the narrative structure from a producer's perspective. Season after season, the couple faces obstacles. If they resolve everything and live quietly, the show loses them. So the show highlights conflict. Conflict is edited, amplified, and structured into arcs. Even normal disagreements can be framed as existential crises. That doesn't mean the events are fake. It means the emphasis is engineered. And engineering emphasis shapes reality. Now, here's the darkest theory layer. Narrative dependency. When your life becomes a storyline, you may unconsciously act in ways that sustain the storyline. You may delay resolution. You may re-engage with conflict. You may perform emotions for the camera. Not because you're evil, but because the system rewards you for it. Jenny and Sumit's endless cycles of drama could be partly real, partly amplified, and partly sustained by the incentives around them. Now let's connect this back to the long con theory. A classic long con requires a structure that keeps the victim engaged over time. Reality TV provides that structure automatically. Each season becomes a new chapter in the con. Each cliffhanger becomes a reason to stay. Each paycheck becomes a reason to continue. Even if no one planned it, the system itself behaves like a con. It extracts emotion, time, and vulnerability and converts it into entertainment and revenue. Jenny's story is the raw material. The show is the refinery. The audience is the market. Now ask yourself, who has the power to end this? Jenny, Sumit, the parents, the network, the audience? The answer is everyone and no one. Everyone benefits in some way from continuation. So continuation becomes the default. Now, let's address the question we teased. If Jenny wanted to walk away today, could she? Legally, probably yes. Emotionally, socially, financially, narratively, it's far more complex. She would be leaving a partner, a country, a show, a fan base, a storyline, and a decade of identity. That's not just a breakup. That's a life reset. That's why long cons and long narratives are so powerful. They entangle every part of your existence. Now consider Sumit. If he wanted to walk away, he would face family backlash, public backlash, fan backlash, and the loss of a defining storyline. The system traps both of them. That's the tragedy of reality TV fame. It gives you visibility and takes. Ad revenue rewards production with budgets. Budgets reward casting decisions that maximize chaos. Chaos creates more drama. It's a feedback loop. Jenny and Sumit are not just people in love. They are nodes in a content ecosystem, and ecosystems are indifferent to individual suffering. They optimize for engagement. Now think about the phrase, love conquers all. It's the ultimate brand-friendly narrative. It justifies everything. It turns red flags into romantic obstacles. It turns manipulation into passion. It turns cultural conflict into destiny. That phrase is the perfect cover for a story that would otherwise look deeply unhealthy. Now, does this mean Jenny and Sumit never loved each other? No. Human relationships are messy. Love can exist inside dysfunctional systems. But love does not erase power dynamics. Love does not erase incentives. Love does not erase the reality TV machine. Now, here's the final layer. Legacy. Jenny and Sumit's story will live online forever. Clips, memes, fan edits, documentaries, reaction channels, conspiracy theories. Their relationship has become digital folklore. That means even after the show ends, the narrative persists. That is both immortality and a prison. Now, before we move to part 4, I want you to imagine an alternate timeline. Imagine if Michael Jones never existed. Imagine if Sumit never messaged Jenny. Imagine if Jenny never moved to India. Imagine if there was no show. Jenny would have lived a quiet life in Palm Springs. Sumit would have lived a quiet life in India. The parents would have lived a quiet traditional life. None of them would be global characters. That single message changed everything. Whether by accident or design, it triggered a decade-long chain reaction that turned private lives into public spectacle. That's the power of a single narrative hook. Now the question remains, was this destiny, chaos, opportunism, or manipulation? The answer may be a combination of all four. But when you map the incentives, the patterns, and the timeline, one thing becomes clear. The story we were sold is only one layer of reality. Underneath it is a machine that rewards drama, delays resolution, and keeps people trapped inside their own story arcs. They use emotional pressure, guilt, and cultural shame. From a TV perspective, it's drama gold. From a control perspective, it's leverage. Every time Jenny and Sumit try to move forward, the family introduces a new hurdle. It keeps Jenny emotionally activated, constantly proving herself, constantly trying to earn acceptance that may never come. That's a classic control loop. Hope, rejection, hope, rejection. It's psychologically exhausting, and exhaustion creates compliance. Next turning point. Jenny's relocation. Moving to India wasn't just a romantic gesture. It was a structural shift. In the United States, Jenny had familiarity, legal systems she understood, social support, and cultural power. In India, she had none of that. She was dependent on Sumit for language, navigation, social norms, and even basic logistics. Dependency is not inherently evil, but it is a power imbalance. And in long cons, power imbalance is currency. If Jenny wanted to leave, it would be complicated. If she wanted to stay, it required constant negotiation. The environment itself became a cage disguised as adventure. Now let's talk money, because every long con eventually touches resources. We know from public interviews and the show that Jenny did not have massive wealth. She had savings, a pension, and limited financial security. Yet she relocated, traveled, and committed to a life that required ongoing expenses. Meanwhile, Sumit gained reality TV income, cameo opportunities, sponsorships, and social media influence. The more chaotic the story, the more screen time. The more screen time, the more money. That doesn't prove exploitation, but it does show asymmetry in benefit. Jenny risked stability. Sumit gained visibility. The family gained relevance. The network gained content. Now let's analyze the psychological pattern.